My mom waited for me to sit down, looked at my plate, looked at me, and said quietly, like she was doing me a favor, "Keep it up and you're going to die fat and alone." I smiled, pretended I hadn't heard, excused myself, walked to the restaurant bathroom, locked the door, sat down on the cold tile floor, leaned my back against the wall, and pressed my hand over my mouth so nobody would hear me cry. The kind of crying that makes no sound. The kind you learn to do when you've spent years practicing it. The smell was bleach cleaner and cheap automatic air freshener. I sat there staring at the beige tile wall, thinking, she said that in front of everyone. In front of my dad, my sister Ashley, Ashley's husband Brandon, my cousin Tiffany, who had driven up from Charlotte for the weekend. Everyone heard it, and nobody said a word. That silence weighed more than anything she could have said. I stayed in there almost 8 minutes. I know the exact time because I kept staring at my phone clock and couldn't stop. Then I stood up, splashed water on my face, dried off with paper towels, unlocked the door and walked back to the table like nothing had happened. Like that sentence hadn't gone through my chest like a kitchen knife, like I was made of stone. But that night, lying in my bed in my midtown apartment, still smelling the restaurant on my hair, something shifted inside me. Not dramatically, not with any kind of soundtrack. It was quiet, like a door that closes carefully so it won't wake anyone up. I decided that had been the last time, but none of them knew. Not my mom Diane, not Dr. Gregory Hawkins, who had been seeing me for 3 years without really listening. Not anyone. What I was about to discover about my own body. And when I discovered it, my life changed in ways they never saw coming. Their lives changed too, just not the way they expected. Because the body they spent years trying to make me ashamed of became the most eloquent proof that they had been wrong about absolutely everything. If anyone has ever told you that you needed to change in order to be loved, subscribe to the channel right now. Tell me in the comments, what's the heaviest thing someone ever said to you about your body, and where did that voice come from? It can be anonymous, but tell me, because you are not alone, and maybe your story needs to be heard just as much as mine needed to be. But let me start from the beginning. To understand the turnaround, you need to understand the fall. To understand the revenge, you need to understand the humiliation. And to understand all of that, you need to know me for real. Not the version my family told. Not the version the doctor wrote in my chart. The real version. Mine. My name is Camille. I was 32 years old when my mom said that at the restaurant. I'm a systems analyst at a tech company in downtown Atlanta. I've been working remote since the pandemic. I have a cat named Biscuit who sleeps on my pillow and a 1-bedroom apartment on Juniper Street in Midtown that I've been paying for on my own for 4 years. I'm funny, genuinely, not the kind of person who goes around announcing it. My friend Janelle always says I should have gone into comedy instead of IT. I have friends who call me when they need advice and who show up at my door when I'm struggling without needing to be asked. I had a life, a good life. You know that kind of life that looks perfectly normal from the outside and has a crack running through the middle of it that you learn to ignore? That was exactly it. Weight had always been part of my life, not the definition of it, part of it. I wore a size 16, sometimes 18, depending on the brand and the day. I had a belly, wide hips, arms I covered at any temperature above freezing. I loved real food, not in some compulsive, destructive way. I loved a Sunday dinner with collard greens and baked chicken and cornbread. I loved Friday night pizza with Janelle. I loved the elaborate breakfast I'd make for myself at 7:30 before opening my laptop. I had a normal relationship with food. The problem was never the food. The problem was everything around it. My mom, Diane, 58 years old, dark hair dyed every 3 weeks, nails always done, a voice that carries an opinion in every syllable. My dad, Robert, the kind of man who doesn't say much but also never contradicts his wife. And my sister Ashley, 2 years younger, 5'4", 132 pounds that she maintains with a dedication that always impressed me, and that I only really understood much later. Ashley was the reference point. Ashley was the before. I was the after, just reversed. That was never said directly. It was never, Ashley is what you should be. It was much more subtle. It was, Ashley found the cutest dress at the Lenox Square Mall the other day. You should go with her sometime. Maybe you'd find something too. It was, Ashley started doing bar class. Have you ever thought about trying it? It's supposed to be really good for your posture. It was the glance my mom would give from my plate to Ashley's plate and back without saying anything. without needing to say anything. Since I was about 12 years old, when puberty arrived for me differently than it arrived for Ashley, when my body went one direction and hers went another, I remember one specific moment. I must have been 13. We'd gone back to school shopping together. My mom spent 20 minutes picking things out for Ashley, enthusiastic, holding things up, making her try stuff on. When it was my turn, she looked at the rack, went quiet for a second, and said, "Let's check the back." They usually keep the bigger sizes toward the back, and walked off without looking at me. I stood in that store aisle at 13 years old, understanding something I didn't have words for yet. I learned early that my body was a problem to be solved. I learned to eat fast before someone commented. I learned to angle myself in photos. I learned to laugh at the comments first, before anyone else could laugh at me. That sense of humor Janelle is always complimenting. It has a source. It's armor. I grew up, built a life, learned to compartmentalize. The work version, the version with friends, and the version that went back to the family every Sunday and turned back into a child, insecure, small, waiting for the next comment. The scale in my bathroom was turned to face the wall. Sometimes I'd step on it with my eyes closed, and when the number appeared, I'd close the app before logging it and go shower trying not to think. I had clothes in the back of my closet I hadn't worn in 3 years, not because they didn't fit, because I was afraid to try them on and find out they no longer did. I left them there like a suspended promise, for when I was different, for when I was something else. I put off doctor's appointments for months because I knew what was coming, avoided photos at events, deleted over 200 photos from my phone in 5 years, curating the records of my own life based on how my body looked in them. Is there anything sadder than editing your own existence because you learned that your body doesn't deserve to be documented? The first signs that something was actually wrong weren't about my weight. They were about the exhaustion, the kind of tired that sleep didn't fix, the irregular periods I mentioned to my mom once, and she said, "That's normal when you're stressed. It'll sort itself out." The hair that kept coming out in the shower, more than it should. The inability to lose weight even when I tried, even when I cut things out, even when I pushed myself for months and the results were almost nothing. I blamed all of it on lack of willpower, because that's what I'd been taught to blame. The restaurant where my mom said those words was Mama's Kitchen, on Edgewood Avenue in the old 4th Ward. A Sunday dinner my dad had organized to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary. Table for 7, family-style Southern food, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and sweet tea already on the table when you sit down. It was October 18th. I know the date because it's the kind of date that stays. Certain dates stay. I had arrived in a good mood. I'd gotten up early, taken my time getting ready, picked out a blue linen blouse I liked, the one that falls well on the shoulder and skims the belly. I'd looked in the mirror before leaving and thought, this works. Not that I looked beautiful, that I looked acceptable. That was the best I could do back then. The table was lively, my dad telling stories from when they were dating, Cousin Tiffany talking about her son who had just started college, Ashley's husband Brandon making a bad joke that everyone laughed at out of politeness. Normal Sunday family dinner. Then came dessert. Banana pudding, the homemade kind that comes in individual cups. I took mine. It was good. I was happy eating it. That's all. I was happy in a small moment over a cup of banana pudding on a Sunday afternoon. That was exactly when my mom spoke. She didn't raise her voice. It wasn't an explosion. It was that worst thing, said calmly, with a concerned tone, in the voice of someone offering advice. "Camille," she waited for me to look at her. "Keep it up and you're going to die fat and alone." The noise at the table didn't stop. The background music kept playing. Cousin Tiffany was looking at her phone. Brandon was refilling water glasses. Only my dad looked at me for half a second and looked away. Ashley froze with her spoon in the air for a moment, then slowly lowered it and stared at her bowl, and I smiled. "Mom, stop," said with that smile that says, "You went too far, but I'm not making a scene. I'm saying it because I love you," she said. "She always loved me. Have you been to the doctor recently?" I went, and what did he say? That I'm fine. Fine how? She raised an eyebrow. "With this weight, fine how? You need to actually talk to him about it, Camille. Don't be embarrassed to bring it up, because if you don't say something, he won't." "Mom," my voice came out firmer than I'd planned. "Not right now." She held my gaze for a second, then shrugged, picked up her spoon and went back to her dessert like the subject was closed. But the subject wasn't closed. It had lodged itself in my chest and stayed there. I ate a few more bites of the banana pudding because I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of leaving it. Made conversation for another 20 minutes that felt like 2 hours. When the check came, I went to the bathroom, sat on the cold floor, and cried that silent cry I already mentioned. And when I came back to the table, I picked up my purse, hugged everyone goodbye, walked out, got in my Uber, and stared out the window the whole ride from the old Fourth Ward back to Midtown, watching Atlanta go by, not thinking about anything. Only when I got home, lying in bed with Biscuit purring against my neck, did the thoughts start to organize themselves. And the main one wasn't pain. It was a kind of cold clarity, like when a fever breaks in the middle of the night and you wake up soaked but lucid. I thought, I cannot keep doing this, but I still didn't know, not fully, what this was. I thought it was just my mom. It would take time to understand how big the thing actually was, and what I had wanted to say at that table. What I rehearsed in my head the entire Uber ride was, do you know that what you just said was cruel? Do you know that I'm 32 years old and your voice still lives inside my head constantly, telling me I'm not enough? Do you know what that costs? I didn't say it. I stayed quiet, like always. That speech was going to come back, later, rewritten, more powerful. But it wasn't just that Sunday. It would be easier if it had only been that Sunday. The body shaming from my family wasn't an event. It was a climate. It was the temperature of the air inside that house. 2 months before the restaurant, it had been the sweet 16 party for Tiffany's daughter. Event hall out in Marietta, long dresses, those photos everyone takes at the entrance. My mom saw me arrive, and the first thing she said, before hello, before a hug, before anything, was, "That dress is pulling a little across the middle, isn't it? It must have shrunk in the wash." I was wearing a dress I had bought 3 weeks earlier, in the size I'd chosen carefully. That fit well. It hadn't shrunk at all. But I said, yeah, it must have shrunk, because it was easier to blame the dress than defend my body. In March of that year, the whole family made a group chat to plan a summer trip to Hilton Head Island. 5 days, house rental, the whole thing. My Aunt Sandra, my dad's sister, who lives in Greenville, South Carolina, sent a message to the group asking if everyone could split rooms the way they'd planned, or if anyone needed their own room for any reason. And my mom responded to all 19 people in the group, including my teenage cousins I saw twice a year. Camille might need a queen bed to herself, y'all know how it is, with a heart emoji. With love, always with love. I left the group quietly, said my notifications had been acting up, nobody asked. But the gym was where things got most concrete in the most literal sense. I signed up in January at a place in Old Fourth Ward, $65 a month, a price that fit my budget. I added a personal training package, 8 sessions a month for $320. The trainer's name was Chad Morrison, 34, tight Under Armour shirt, the kind of guy who has a CrossFit trophy somewhere in his apartment and needs you to know that within the first 5 minutes of meeting him. In our first session, Chad had me fill out an intake form, asked my weight, my height, my goal. I said, I want to have more energy, improve my overall fitness. He wrote it down, looked at the form, looked at me and said, got it. But you know exercise alone isn't going to do it, right? Nutrition is 80%. I said I knew that. He said, it's just that sometimes people come in thinking they can train and then eat whatever at home and wonder why nothing changes, you know? I said I understood. He said, with your body type, you're going to need to be really consistent, not trying to discourage you, just being real. First day. He didn't even know my last name yet. Over the following weeks, Chad made a point of correcting me in front of other clients whenever he could have done it privately. Camille, release your core. You're holding everything there. Camille, watch your lower back. When there's more weight in the midsection, it creates extra stress. They were technical observations, always with technical justifications, always delivered in a tone that made clear I was a special case, the kind that required more attention, more patience, more tolerance. There was a day I came in straight from work, blouse a little wrinkled, hair in a quick ponytail. 3 other clients were on the floor. Chad was walking by, spotted me, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Rough day? You look a little run down." He made a tiny pause before run down, that tiny pause that says everything. One of the other clients looked away. Another suddenly found something very interesting on their phone. I said, I came straight from the office. He said, got it. And did you eat well today? Yes. You sure? Small smile. Sometimes we don't even realize what we've been putting in our bodies throughout the day. I paid $320 a month to hear that. And then there was Dr. Gregory Hawkins, general practitioner, practice in Buckhead, $280 a visit out of network because my insurance had a 3-month wait for in-network providers. I'd been seeing him for 3 years. Communicative doctor, always seemed to have time for a real conversation. The kind of doctor who comes across as attentive until you notice that his attention only ever goes in one direction. Every problem I brought him, exhaustion, hair loss, irregular periods, inability to lose weight despite trying, he would listen, nod, and arrive at the same conclusion. Camille, the single biggest driver of all these symptoms is your weight. If you can get down 10-15 pounds, you're going to see a lot of this improve. Once I asked about my thyroid, he said, "You don't present like a hypothyroidism case. These symptoms are common in patients with elevated BMI. I asked about polycystic ovary syndrome. He said, "You don't check all the boxes. The irregular periods could just be stress." I asked about insulin resistance. He said, "Let's wait until you've made some lifestyle changes before we go down that road, because current weight can skew those results and make them hard to read." 3 years, $280 a visit, counting the follow-ups. Over $3,000 spent to be told the problem was me. In October, 1 week before the restaurant, I had gone in for a routine visit with Dr. Hawkins, stepped on the scale in the exam room. Like always, the nurse wrote it down. Dr. Hawkins came in, opened my chart, looked at the numbers, and said, without looking up, while he was typing, "You're up 4.8 pounds since your last visit. That's 3 months. What happened?" The way he said, "What happened?" like someone asking what happened to a project that went off the rails, a deadline that got missed. I said I wasn't sure, that I'd been doing what I could. He looked at me over his glasses. "Camille," long pause, "I've given you every tool you need. The nutrition plan your dietitian put together is solid. The training you're doing is sufficient. At some point, you're going to have to decide whether you actually want to change this or whether you're okay staying where you are. Because I can give you the roadmap, but I can't drive the car for you. Lack of discipline, lack of will, a character flaw dressed up in clinical language." I paid the copay, walked out, got on the MARTA train, and stood in the car staring at nothing for 6 stops without being able to think a single coherent thought. 1 week later, my mom told me I was going to die fat and alone, and it was the accumulation of all of it. 3 years of Hawkins, 4 months of Chad, 32 years of Diane, that made that Sunday the Sunday it was. The month after the restaurant was the hardest, not because I fell apart. It was almost the opposite. It was a strange emptiness, like when you're sick and the fever breaks but you're still too weak to stand, and you don't quite know what you feel. I cancelled my sessions with Chad, texted him that I needed to pause for scheduling reasons. He replied, "Sounds good, reach out when you're ready," and I wasn't surprised by any of it. I kept going to the gym, but alone. At times when Chad wasn't there. 40 minutes on the treadmill with a podcast, then home. No clear goal, no plan. I just needed to get out of the apartment and move so I wouldn't stay frozen inside my own head. My relationship with food during that stretch was complicated in a way I couldn't name until much later. It wasn't binging in the dramatic sense. It was absence. I ate because it was time to eat, made pasta because the pasta needed to be made, grabbed a snack at work without tasting it. It was like I had disconnected from my own body. The body that caused so much trouble could handle its own logistics without my emotional participation. One night, a Thursday in November, 2 in the morning, I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth, and I caught myself looking in the mirror for longer than I should have. Not contemplatively, analytically. I was scanning each part of myself like I was a product to be assessed. And I heard with a clarity that scared me, my mom's voice inside my head saying, "Keep it up." And then I realized it wasn't her voice anymore. It was mine. I had internalized that sentence so completely it had become an automatic thought. I went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light, and stayed there for however long. Biscuit came and put his head on my knee. I said out loud to him in the dark, "I don't even know who said it first anymore, them or me." He purred. Cats are pragmatic that way. The closet had clothes I avoided trying on. The scale was turned against the wall. I had a photo on Instagram from a work event that I deleted because in one of the pictures I was laughing, a real laugh, the kind that makes your eyes go small. And I looked at that photo and thought it was a nice photo. And then my brain asked, but isn't that too much of you showing up? And I deleted it. I deleted a photo of myself laughing because there was too much of me in it. There are things you can only see from a distance. At that point, I was still standing in the middle of it. Janelle called on a Friday that month. Janelle and I met in 7th grade at our middle school in Decatur, and the friendship survived different colleges, different neighborhoods, and the 2 years she spent in Seattle for her graduate program. She's a speech-language pathologist, lives in Inman Park, has an uncanny sense of when to call. You've gone quiet, she said. No preamble. I'm here. Being here is not the same as not having gone quiet. Silence from me. Camille. Her tone changed. What happened? And I told her. Told her about the restaurant, the sentence, the bathroom floor, the Uber, the night I couldn't sleep. Told her about Chad and Dr. Hawkins and the family group chat about Hilton Head. Told her about the deleted photos, the scale against the wall, the clothes I didn't try on. Told her all of it at once, in a flat voice like someone reading off a grocery list. When I finished, she was quiet for a few seconds. Camille, she said, you need to change doctors. I've tried others before. It's always basically the same. No, it isn't. You need a doctor, and I mean a woman doctor, who is actually going to investigate. Because listen, what you're describing, the exhaustion, the hair loss, the irregular periods, the inability to lose weight despite genuine effort, that has a name. It might have a name. And Hawkins never looked for it because he decided on his diagnosis before he ran a single relevant test. He said, I didn't. Hawkins said a lot of things that weren't based on any specific testing. Has he ever run a full hormone panel on you? Silence from me. Camille, no. In 3 years, he never ran hormone panels. He did a CBC, a metabolic panel, cholesterol, hormones. Her voice was firm, but the kind of firm that comes from caring. You don't need to lose weight to be loved, but you deserve to understand what is actually happening in your own body. And nobody has the right to humiliate you along the way. That sentence landed differently than anything I'd heard before. Because it wasn't, you need to take care of yourself. It was, you deserve to know. There was an enormous difference there that took me a little while to be able to articulate. Janelle sent me Dr. Monica Webb's contact, endocrinologist, office on Peachtree Road in Buckhead, $350 out of pocket, though she did take some insurance plans. Just go to one appointment and see how you feel. One appointment. I called to schedule the next morning. It took me 6 weeks to get in to see Dr. Webb. Waitlist, full schedule. I got an appointment for mid-January, and in that time, something small started to shift. Not dramatically, gradually, like the temperature changing without you noticing the exact moment the cold became cold. The change wasn't in my body. It was in how I occupied the space inside my own head. I started noticing the automatic thoughts, those phrases that surfaced when I looked in the mirror, when I served food on my plate, when I avoided a photo, and I started asking myself where they came from. The answer was always the same, from external voices I had internalized so completely that they had become mine. My mom's voice, Chad's voice, Dr. Hawkins's voice, voices that had told me for years that my body was the problem, and that I had learned to repeat to myself in the silence of the bathroom at 2 in the morning. I started going to the gym more consistently, not as punishment, but as something I actually wanted to do. I'd go in the mornings before work, put my earbuds in, walk on the treadmill, do some exercises I'd learned. No Chad, no number goals, no eye on the mirror measuring inches, just moving because I wanted to move. I stopped deleting photos. I did it deliberately, as a practice. Every time I took a photo and felt the urge to delete it because of how my body looked, I left it. One, then another, then another. Let them accumulate. They were normal photos. They were records of a normal life I had been trying to erase. I started writing in a notebook, not a sentimental journal, more like a file. Dates, phrases, episodes, the restaurant, the group chat, the appointments with Hawkins, the sessions with Chad. I put it in chronological order, cataloging what had happened. I didn't know yet that I was building something. I just knew I needed to organize it. My appointment with Dr. Monica Webb fell on a Tuesday in January at 3 in the afternoon. Her office was in a medical building off Peachtree Road, 2nd floor, the kind of clinical space that doesn't try to be beautiful but works perfectly well. An attentive receptionist, about 12 minutes of waiting, then a door opened. Dr. Webb looked to be in her mid-40s, natural hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the energy of someone who has zero patience for ego, but unlimited patience for listening to her patients. She greeted me by name, asked me to sit down, pulled up my chart on the computer and said, "Tell me what brought you in today." Just like that. Not, "What's your chief complaint?" in that clinical tone that means they're already typing before you finish. Just, "Tell me." I told her. Chronic exhaustion, hair loss that gets worse in cycles, irregular periods for about 4 years, inability to lose weight despite changing my habits and exercising regularly, and then the sentence that came out without me planning it. My previous doctor told me it was all related to my weight, that if I lost the weight, everything would improve. She looked at me for a moment, not with judgment, with the kind of attention that seems to be listening to what's behind the sentence too. Did he ever run a hormone panel? No. TSH, free T4, T3? No. LH, FSH, estradiol, progesterone, total and free testosterone? Never. Anti-Müllerian hormone? I didn't even know what that was. No. She wrote it down. Fasting insulin, HOMA IR? He ran a fasting glucose once, said it was normal. Normal fasting glucose doesn't rule out insulin resistance. She said it matter-of-factly, not accusatorially, but the weight of it hit me. Do you have a history of acne? Yes, since I was about 15. Treated it with a dermatologist, got it under control. Excess hair growth in unusual areas? A little, but I assumed it was normal. More noticeable mood changes at certain points in your cycle. Yes, but does the hair loss get worse right before your period? It does. She stopped writing, looked at me. Camille, based on what you're describing, I want to run a full hormone panel, fasting insulin, HOMA IR, and a pelvic ultrasound. It may turn out to be nothing, or it may turn out to be something treatable that nobody bothered to look for. The word treatable entered me differently than the others. I had the tests done over the following week. The ultrasound was at an imaging center on Peachtree Dunwoody Road, $210. The blood work I had done at a lab in Midtown, $185. Amounts that stung, but that I paid because something had changed in the way I thought about my own body, not as an enemy, but as the place I lived, and that deserved a proper investigation. I went back to Dr. Webb's office 12 days later with the results in hand. She opened them on her computer, stayed quiet for a few seconds, then looked at me and asked the question that changed everything. Has anyone in your medical history ever investigated you for polycystic ovary syndrome? She said it with the calm of someone who already knows the answer but wants to hear my version. No. I asked my previous doctor once, and he said I didn't fit the profile. She turned the monitor toward me, showed me the ultrasound, the ovaries, the follicles distributed in the characteristic pattern, showed me the elevated LH, the low FSH ratio, the testosterone slightly above the upper limit, showed me the HOMA IR, 2.7, borderline for insulin resistance. You have polycystic ovary syndrome, she said, with associated insulin resistance. That explains the exhaustion, the hair loss, the irregular periods, and, listen to this, it explains the difficulty losing weight despite diet and exercise, because insulin resistance interferes with fat metabolism in a significant way. I stared at the screen. You asked to have this investigated once? Yes. And your previous doctor said it wasn't necessary? Said I didn't fit the profile. She was quiet for a moment, then said, with a surgical precision I will never forget, polycystic ovary syndrome is one of the most common endocrine conditions in women of reproductive age. It is systematically underdiagnosed because the symptoms are frequently attributed to other factors, like weight. A pause. This is not your lack of discipline, Camille. It never was. I didn't cry in the office. I held it together, kept my eyes on the monitor until the numbers blurred, but I held it. I cried in the elevator. The kind of crying that isn't sadness. It's the release of a tension you've been carrying so long you forgot you were carrying it. 3 years paying $280 a visit to a doctor who decided on my diagnosis before examining me. 3 years being treated like a case of personal failure. While there was a condition, with a name, with a treatment, with an established clinical protocol, that he had refused to investigate because I didn't have the right profile. The profile. I didn't have the profile he had imagined before opening my chart. The irony was so perfect it almost made me want to laugh. Almost. Dr. Webb built the treatment plan collaboratively. Low-dose metformin for the insulin resistance, targeted supplementation, a referral to a registered dietitian who specialized in PCOS, and most importantly, a real monitoring plan, with periodic labs, with reassessment, with attention to my cycle as clinical data rather than an inconvenience. The dietitian she referred me to was Rachel Odom, RD, with a practice in Virginia Highland. My first appointment with her lasted 50 minutes. 50 minutes in which she asked about my dietary history, my emotional relationship with food, my routine, what I actually enjoyed eating, what triggered anxiety around food, my sleep, what I felt before and after eating. 50 minutes in which she never once said I needed to eat less. She said, "We're going to work with your metabolism, not against it, because with insulin resistance, aggressive calorie restriction can actually worsen your hormonal situation. We're going to do this differently." Differently. The word I had needed to hear for years. The process took months, not weeks. It wasn't dramatic or linear. There were weeks when the scale didn't move, and I had to remind myself, consciously, with effort, that the scale wasn't the only data point. There were emotional setbacks, days I ate out of anxiety and felt bad about it and needed to call Janelle at 11 at night. There were days I went to the gym with that strange energy of anger converted into movement, which is different from the energy of punishment. It's cleaner, more yours. And then there was the day I tried on a pair of jeans that had been sitting in the back of my closet for a year and a half. The ones I hadn't touched because I was afraid to. They fit. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror for about 3 minutes, not with exaggerated triumph, with something quieter and deeper, the feeling that something was moving in the right direction, not because of the number on the tag, because of the jeans that had been sitting there, kept as proof that I had been shrinking myself in advance before anyone even asked me to. They fit, and I was there, whole. I found a new gym through Janelle, in a converted warehouse in Ponce City Market, $75 a month. Personal trainer named Tanya Brooks that Dr. Webb had recommended, who in our first session asked me what my goals were, and when I said, "I want to feel stronger," said, "That's a perfect place to start. Let's go." Without any pause, without any analysis of my body as a problem to be corrected. That was what the difference felt like, not the result in the mirror. It was the space between the words. Over the following months, I started noticing that the people around me were noticing the change, and the way they noticed it said everything about who they were. Janelle said, one afternoon when we were eating lunch at Ponce City Market, "You seem different, not physically, in the way you carry yourself. You're taking up more space." That was the kind of comment that made sense. Chad, my former trainer, who I hadn't seen in months, passed me on the street near the old gym one Saturday morning. He looked me up and down, that evaluating scan he never tried to hide, and said with a grin, "Camille, look at you. You look great. Did you get back into it?" As if I had been on a break and was now returning to the world with his approval, I said I never stopped, and kept walking. About Dr. Hawkins I found out through another channel. I'll get there in a minute, but before I do, I need to tell you what happened in April, about 4 months after my appointment with Dr. Webb. It was a Monday. I was going through my emails when one came in from someone I didn't know. The name was Brenda Caldwell. The message said, "Camille, hi, you don't know me, but we share the same doctor, or we did. Your name was given to me by a mutual acquaintance who knew you had been a patient of Dr. Hawkins. I'd love to talk if you're open to it. There's something I need to tell you." I replied to Brenda that same day. We met on a Thursday at a coffee shop on Highland Avenue in Inman Park late in the afternoon. She was probably in her mid-40s, an elementary school teacher, low-C's pulled back, a quick smile that appeared and disappeared like someone who wasn't sure yet when it was safe to relax. We ordered coffee. She put her hands on the table, laced her fingers together, and started. "I was Dr. Hawkins's patient for 5 years," she said. "I went in for similar issues, exhaustion, trouble losing weight, irregular cycles. He gave me the same diagnosis he gave you, lack of discipline wrapped up in medical language." I looked at her. 18 months ago, I switched doctors. My new physician investigated and found Hashimoto's thyroiditis. 5 years with Hawkins, and he never ran a serial TSH. She paused. When I started talking about this with people, I found out I wasn't the only one. I've connected with 3 other former patients with similar stories. Endocrine conditions he never investigated because he put it all on the weight. 3 others, I said. That I know of. There are probably more. She pulled out her phone, showed me a group text thread. We started talking. Monique has PCOS just like you. 4 years without a diagnosis. Keisha has insulin resistance. Tanya got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 6 months after she left his practice, after years of being treated like a case of poor self-control. I was quiet for a moment. "Why reach out to me specifically?" I asked. Because Tanya knows a friend of yours, Janelle, and Janelle mentioned that you had just been diagnosed with PCOS after 3 years with no investigation. She looked at me. We're thinking about filing a formal complaint with the Georgia Composite Medical Board. We'd need statements. You're not obligated, but we wanted you to know you're not alone in this. We talked for over an hour. She told me every detail she had. I told her mine. When we left the coffee shop, the sun was low, that late afternoon Atlanta light that makes everything look golden for about 15 minutes. That week, I went home and opened the notebook where I'd been recording everything. Dates, quotes, appointments, amounts paid. And I understood what it was for. It wasn't a record of bitterness. It was documentation. I spent 3 weekends organizing it. Family group chat screenshots, the messages saved in my phone, dates of the appointments with Dr. Hawkins, notes from the chat sessions I had written down in the notebook at the time, exact amounts, exact phrases. And I found something while I was organizing. Buried in my phone between recipe screenshots and memes Janelle sends, I found a screenshot from the Hilton Head group chat, my mom's message about needing a queen bed to myself. And scrolling back up through the thread, I found something I had seen at the time but hadn't fully processed. 2 days before my mom's message, in a side thread I hadn't been added to, my Aunt Sandra had accidentally included my number and then removed me before I noticed. But the notification history had stayed. I found a message my mom had sent Sandra. Sandra, do you think Camille is going to want to wear a swimsuit at the beach? Because if it's going to make the boys uncomfortable, we might need to figure something out. The message was 3 months old. Before the restaurant, I stared at my phone screen for a time I couldn't measure. This wasn't just a careless comment at a family dinner anymore. This was a backstage conversation. This was my mom discussing my body like it was event logistics, a variable to be managed, a potential source of discomfort to be preemptively contained. I acted calmly, took a screenshot, saved it in 3 different places, opened the notebook to a new page. Dr. Hawkins called me on a Wednesday in March. I recognized the number. I sat and watched the phone ring 3 times before I answered. Camille, he said, in a tone I hadn't heard from him before, less clinical, more careful. Hi, I noticed you haven't been coming in. I wanted to check in and make sure everything was okay. Everything is fine, I said, steady voice. I also heard that you're seeing another doctor now. Pause. If there's anything I said or did that made you uncomfortable, I'd really like to have that conversation. He had heard about the group Brenda was putting together. He was trying to get ahead of it. Dr. Hawkins, I said, I appreciate the call, but I don't think there's much to talk about. You had 3 years to actually listen to me. You didn't use them. A pause. Have a good day. I hung up. 2 days later, my mom texted our private thread. Camille, your Aunt Sandra mentioned you've been skipping Sunday dinners. Is everything okay? We're here if you need anything. I saved the message. Didn't respond yet. The right moment was coming. I would know it when it got there. In early May, Ashley called me. Different from any conversation we'd had in years. Cam, she said, can I tell you something that's going to sound strange? Go ahead. I know what Mom said at the restaurant was awful. I should have said something in the moment. I didn't. I stayed quiet because that's what I always do. It's what we both learned to do. A pause. But there's something else. Something I never told you. What is it? My relationship with food has never been what you think it is. Her voice was different. More worn down, less polished. Since I was 17, I've been restricting in ways I know aren't healthy. I don't let it show because I learned that the thin body was what was expected. But there's a cost. There's a huge cost that I pay every single day and nobody sees it because the number on the scale is where it's supposed to be. I was quiet. I was never the example, she said. I was another casualty with different symptoms, and I should have told you that a long time ago. That conversation landed in a way I still don't fully understand, because it reframed everything. Ashley, who I had believed for years, was proof that I was the broken one. She had been carrying a different weight, with a different cost, invisible, because it was hidden behind the appearance of having it together. Our mom had hurt both of us, in different ways, from the same source. We made plans to get together without our parents for the first time in a long time. Got brunch at a place on Virginia Avenue in Inman Park on a Saturday afternoon. Sat there for 3 hours. She told me things I never would have guessed. I told her things she never knew. When we left, something was different between us. Not repaired, because it wasn't something that had broken. It was something that had never existed before and was starting to be built. But what changed things publicly was the Sunday dinner at my parents' house in May. My mom had organized a dinner to celebrate my grandmother's 80th birthday. Bigger table, relatives from farther away. The kind of gathering I usually arrived at with my stomach in a knot. But this time I arrived with the notebook. Not physically, it was at home. I arrived with everything in that notebook organized in my head, with dates, with exact phrases, with the specific weight of each one. I sat down, made conversation. 8. The celebration was celebratory the way grandmother birthday dinners are. My grandmother is an 80-year-old woman who plays bid whist and watches the news with running commentary. She has never once in her life made a comment about my body, which makes her my undisputed favorite. My mom's comment came with dessert. It always came with dessert. She was telling my Aunt Sandra about my recent changes, about how much weight I'd lost, in that tone of pride that turned my stomach because it wasn't directed at me. It was directed at herself. Thank God she finally decided to take care of herself. I always made a point of saying something, because if your own mother doesn't tell you the truth, who will? Sometimes you need to hear something hard before you actually do something about it. Aunt Sandra nodded along. That's real. The ones who speak up are the ones who care. I set my dessert spoon down slowly in my bowl, looked at my mom. Mom, I said. She looked at me, still wearing that smile of someone telling a story with a happy ending. I need to say something, and I'm going to say it here now, because what I have to say is not something I'm putting off anymore. The energy at the table shifted. My dad looked up from his plate. What is it, Camille? Her voice dropped. You spent years commenting on my body like it belonged to the whole family, to my face and behind my back. Pause. Calm voice, the calm of someone who had been organizing their thoughts for months. I have the message you sent Sandra about the Hilton Head trip, about whether I was going to make the guys uncomfortable at the beach. The color drained from her face. I don't know if you understand what it's like to wake up every day and hear your own voice saying the things someone else taught you to say. Do you know that automatic thought? You're too much. You take up too much space. You're a problem. I recently realized that's not my voice. That's yours. I internalized it so completely that I lost track of the difference. Camille, this isn't the time, she started. I decide what the time is now. I didn't raise my voice. I lowered it. I also found out that I have polycystic ovary syndrome with insulin resistance. That explains everything you called a lack of willpower for years. It has a name, it has a treatment, it has a doctor who figured it out in 20 minutes. The same thing your doctor refused to look for in 3 years. Complete silence at the table. Even my grandmother had gone still. You said you were saying it with love. I believe you believe that. The voice didn't waver. But love that only shows up to point out what's wrong with my body isn't love. It's control with a caring label on it. And I spent 32 years confusing the two. My mom's eyes were wet. Aunt Sandra was staring at her plate. My dad was looking at me in a way I hadn't seen before. Not agreement, not disagreement. Something more complicated that was going to take more time to understand. You said to me at that restaurant in October in front of everyone at that table that I was going to die fat and alone. Last sentence, the one I had rehearsed the most. You were wrong about the fat, and you were wrong about the alone. A pause. The only weight I needed to lose was the weight of your opinion about my body. I stood up, hugged my grandmother, picked up my purse and walked out. It wasn't a blow-up. It wasn't a scene. It was more surgical than that. I walked out the front door with my feet steady on the ground, got in my Uber, and when the car door closed, I took a long breath and did not cry. I was beyond crying. I was in a quieter, deeper place that didn't have a name yet, but that I knew was good. Weeks later, Brenda updated me. The group had formally filed their complaint with the Georgia Composite Medical Board. 4 patients with documentation, working with an attorney. The complaint was for systematic diagnostic negligence with weight bias. Dr. Hawkins had been notified. The process was underway. These things move slowly, but they were moving. Chad, I learned through the old gym, had lost 3 clients I knew. People who had heard about the conversations and decided to leave. The morning boot camp class, which used to be packed, was running at about half capacity. Not because of me directly, because of a pattern that, once named, starts to be seen. My mom didn't reach out for 2 weeks. When she finally called, the conversation was brief and without her usual tone. She said, I heard what you said. Long pause. I didn't know I was doing that to you. Longer pause. I want you to know I love you. I said, I know you do. That was never the problem. The problem is what you do with it. That wasn't the end of the conversation between us. It was the beginning of a different one. More honest, harder, but more real. With Ashley, things kept growing. She started seeing a therapist who specializes in disordered eating. We talked more. We told each other things we had never said. It was like discovering a sister inside the sister I thought I knew. What I wasn't feeling was triumph. Triumph makes noise. What I felt was quieter than that. It was justice. The right word was that one, justice. I'm telling you all of this from where I am right now. It's a Sunday morning, early October, almost a year after that restaurant on Edgewood Avenue. I'm sitting at my kitchen table in my midtown apartment with fresh brewed coffee, that October Atlanta morning light coming through the window in a way that still feels like a gift. I lost weight. Yes, I need to say that because it's part of the story, not the point of it. With the PCOS and insulin resistance treatment, with Rachel's and Tanya's guidance, over 10 months I lost 35 pounds, gradually, with setbacks, with weeks where nothing changed in the mirror but everything changed in how I slept and how I woke up. I didn't lose it for my mom. I didn't lose it for Chad. I didn't lose it to prove anything to anyone. I lost it because my body, treated with respect and given the right tools, went where it could go. And I feel good, not perfect, good, which is different and infinitely better. I have a life that is mine. New role at work, a promotion that came through in August, senior product manager, 30% raise, a team I actually enjoy. The gym became a part of my week, not as punishment, but as a ritual I chose. A relationship with food that is, for the first time in my adult life, genuinely enjoyable. I eat what I like, with awareness, without guilt, without that external watching eye I learned to carry before I learned almost anything else. And I look at myself in the bathroom mirror in the mornings, before coffee, hair undone, no filter, and I think, I like this woman. Not for how she looks, for who she is. On what happened to everyone else, Dr. Hawkins's complaint with the medical board is proceeding. These things take time, but they're moving. Chad's morning class is half empty. Dr. Webb is still my doctor. At my last appointment, she said my labs look better than they have in years. My mom and I are in a slow, honest process. She came to one session of therapy with me last month for the first time. It wasn't easy. It was real. I don't follow what happens in the day-to-day lives of most of these people anymore. Not because I forgot, because it became irrelevant. There's a huge difference between forgetting and making something irrelevant. One is avoidance, the other is freedom. The woman who deleted photos of herself laughing because too much of her was showing no longer exists. In her place is someone I admire, not for the number on the scale, not for the genes that fit now, but for the courage it took to survive what she survived and to choose instead of hardening, to open up and understand what was really happening. I want to say something directly to you, because if you made it this far, something in this story touched something in yours. Medical weight bias is real and it is systemic. You have the right to demand a complete clinical investigation before any provider attributes your symptoms to your weight. If a doctor has never run hormone panels, fasting insulin, or investigated conditions like PCOS, hypothyroidism, or Cushing's syndrome, and keeps telling you the problem is your weight, you have the right, and I would say the responsibility to yourself, to seek another opinion. That isn't ingratitude, that is self-preservation. Family body shaming comes wrapped in love and is the hardest kind to name. When it comes from the people who are supposed to protect you, your brain gets confused. She loves me and says it's for my own good, so maybe she's right. But genuine concern for your health does not require humiliation to exist. When it comes with public embarrassment, with comparison, with love that's conditional on your appearance, that is control. You can love your family and establish that your body is not a topic of conversation. Internalized body shame is the quietest kind because it sounds like your own voice. It isn't. It's the voice of whoever taught you that your body was a problem. And that teaching can be unlearned. With time, with therapy, with patience with yourself, with the decision to notice when that voice speaks and ask yourself where it came from. If you are seeing a healthcare provider who makes you feel ashamed, who attributes everything to your weight without investigating, who uses language that sounds like a judgment of your character, you can and should leave. You don't owe loyalty to someone who doesn't respect you. And if you're in a spiral of behaviors you know aren't good for you, whether that's restriction, binging, isolation, that has treatment. There are therapists who specialize in the relationship between people and their bodies and food. There are support groups. There are paths forward. What you're feeling has a name, and that name is not weakness. If I had understood this earlier, if someone had told me at 20 years old that there's a difference between care and control, between love and humiliation, between a diagnosis and a judgment, I would have protected myself so much sooner. And if you are living what I lived, know this: you are not wrong. Your body is not the problem. The problem was always what people put around it. If this story reached something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear that she is not alone. Tell me in the comments, what was the moment you decided you were going to stop accepting less than you deserve? It could have been big or small. It could have been on a bathroom floor, in a restaurant, in a doctor's office, in a message you found on your phone, in a late-night conversation with a friend who told you the truth without softening it. Tell me, because those moments deserve to be said out loud. Thank you for staying until the end. I know it's long, but some stories need room to breathe, and so does yours. See you in the next one.